Hey, Saints fans, welcome back to the Confessional podcast. Tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about the injury report, give you some updates on where the Saints are at, go over a little bit of film review from the past few days. So if y'all are interested in that, we'll talk about that just a smidge. We'll go too deep unless y'all have a lot of questions from our film review. We did one on Michael Thomas. We also did one on the sacks that the defense forced and the offensive line gave up, as well as a few other things that we can still know. To put out a couple of other things on Twitter, or I guess now x.com, which is, God, just feels so dangerous to say. And then we'll also take a look at everything else that is involved in going to Green Bay. Now, positive about going to Green Bay real quick. We're real positive about this week 3 game. It's not in December. I have to go to Green Bay. I'm glad to go in September, not December. But we'll see how it plays out. Who dat to all those over here in the channel early. Mike, good to see you. Evan, Be Kind, K, yeah, Rainey, Mr. Jerry, Chemo Slice, and Mac Dizano, James Griffon, St. Woody. Good to see you, Raheem Guillaume. Good to see you, Be Kind, Chemo, St. Woody, LL, everybody else. Come on in. Great that you're here. Glad that you're here. Happy that you are here. Appreciate every single one of you. So, we got a lot to discuss today. I guess the injury report is the best way to start it off. So, let's go right there. Technically, you do have one Saint who is now, I guess you could say, more injured than the last. Ugo Amadi was added to the injury report today in limited fashion with a knee injury, but did participate limited. Kendre Miller is full participant. We can expect him to play this upcoming Sunday. Now, this was also reported by John Hendricks a few days ago. They expect him to play this weekend. So that's not really a surprise. Good news for Saints fans looking for the rookie to get an opportunity. I think a really good thing for the offensive line as well. Not because I think that Kendre Miller is going to come out and just dominate as a running back, though, heck, I would love for him to do that. But I think it's really important because one thing that seems to be missing for that offensive line is consistency in the run blocking. I think a lot of that is the fact that this offensive line with Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram, and now with a lot of the current running backs that seem to be still going after, is more built around a zone, a wide zone as they refer to it, but also known as outside zone. There's also inside zone they'll run split zone, etc. And the Saints offensive line will run just about any set in terms of run blocking. They'll run duo, they'll run man power, they'll run trap, but they seem to be more comfortable in the style of offensive linemen they've been drafting and going after are definitely more that fit that zone style. So I think getting Kendre Miller back, who fits that a heck of a lot better than Jamal Williams does, could be important. And speaking of Jamal Williams, he is DNP past 2 days. At this point, he's missed the install. Wednesday on a short week is simply going to be your install day. He is somebody that I'm going to say probably isn't going to play. Now, that's not a guarantee, but the New Orleans Saints did officially bring Tony Jones Jr. to the active roster. So that's kind of important to note there. And then if you go look on the opposite side, because Marcus May having his 6-game suspension, you now have got JT Gray and Jordan Howden probably lining up in that free safety spot, or at least that backside spot. Usually he's going to be the deep safety there, playing free safety for Marcus May. And they've been very high on Jordan Howden, but he's an unproven young player, unproven rookie. So how excited can you get about it? Tentatively, but I wouldn't dedicate too much to that excitement. Another addition to the Saints roster, and I know some Saints fans are going to be a little bit, what? But a linebacker was called up to the active roster today. That linebacker was Ty Summers. Veteran Ty Summers was brought to the active roster. The New Orleans Saints currently have 6 linebackers on the active roster. Jalen Smith still sitting down on the practice squad, so he's still with the team. But in terms of who they called up today, they called up the one, the only, Ty Summers. Not the name many of y'all were expecting, and that's how it goes. I don't know how much he'll actually play, and it's probably more to do with special teams help than anything else. But we'll just kind of have to see how that plays out. It's possible that with JT Gray probably going to get more snaps on defense, maybe in theory takes less snaps in special teams. Obviously, that's where he's made a Pro Bowl name for himself. But if that's the case, well, now you got somebody else out there to run those reps. We'll see if that ends up being what they've done. Say, Woody, well, good to see you. I'm glad that you're joining into the live podcast here. So that's kind of your injury report for the Saints. Just to recap real quick for if you missed anybody. Foster Moreau is limited. He was DNP on Wednesday. He did practice today. Jamal Williams is not practicing. Taysom Hill was back to full participation after a slight knee injury. Kendre Miller, full participation, and Ugo Amadi is limited. Now, over in the Green Bay Packers, you have David Bakhtiari, one of, in my opinion, the best offensive linemen of the past decade. He was DNP, but it's listed as rest for veterans. So don't expect to see him miss. Now, one person that could still miss, though, is Elgton Jenkins, who has a knee injury and is DNP on both today and yesterday. Again, is that the biggest deal? I think depth along the offensive line matters. And this is a guy that starts on the left side next to David Bakhtiari. So, in theory, the left side of the offensive line could be underperforming, but specifically the interior of that left side of the line. Aaron Jones, the running back, was limited. He did get promoted to limited today, was DNP. Yesterday, Rashawn Gary at linebacker, as well as Luke Van Ness, both limited. Now, Christian Watson, one of their wide receivers, went from limited yesterday to do not participate today. Did not practice today as one of their starting wide receivers. So that could be very interesting going in, especially with the New Orleans Saints having a healthy set of corners at the moment. Then you have their punter, Daniel Whelan, who is full participation. And then Zane Anderson, their safety, went from no listing yesterday to DNP today. So there is your full catch-up list. Now, we'll go ahead and mention that Zane Anderson is not one of their starting safeties. But there is your full-on injury update for the Saints. Obviously, the big one to me is got to be Kendre Miller returning. I think that could be huge for this offense. And then as far as what can be the most impactful for the Saints on the opposite side, and then I think the answer is Elgton Jenkins. If he's not able to play, he's not able to go out, that opens up opportunities for Breze, for Shepard, and even Malcolm Roach. Now, we'll have to see if that actually ends up being the case. So, because they did come out and say that he won't go out on IR, Elgton Jenkins, that is. But it's an MCL sprain. Now, it is possible to play through some of those depending on the severity of the sprain. Now, because I don't, cover the Packers, I can't tell you exactly how severe it is. But I would say that I do not expect him to play having sustained that injury last week. I'd be very shocked if he does. So opportunity there. We're going to talk matchups a little bit here in that matchup between Packers here and the Saints. That's going to be one that you definitely got to focus on. And we talk about what can you do to take advantage of that. Trying the twist stunt game and slicing inside with Tano Passignon, with even Foskey, with Carl Granderson, and even moving some guys around the interior to try to take advantage of some matchups if you feel comfortable with going after what will likely be Royce Newman, who's probably going to end up being the guy that slides in and takes those snaps. Now, Newman is not exactly a rookie, as a veteran player, backup player, but veteran player. So we'll see how that actually ends out playing out. But in terms of who to keep an eye out on, well, that's exactly who you should be keeping an eye out on. So that's going to be your injury report. Any questions in the chat before we move on to our next piece? Do you think Pete gets some snaps to the left side of the offensive line struggling lately? I do not, St. Woody. I think that they're going to stick with Hurst and Penning, at least for the moment. And if it continues to get bad for Hurst, you could see that move. But I'll be honest, right now, I think the Saints are going to play it safe. And here's why. Because you're 2-0. If you were 0-2, maybe you think about making drastic changes. But they're still finding ways to win, even with things not going their way every play and even in a lot of the game, right? So that is kind of a big deal, in my opinion. How are they going to address that moving forward? It's all going to be based on how do they improve or not improve. I would say that there was an improvement from week 1 to week 2 along the offensive line, but it definitely was nowhere near like, hey, this unit is doing well right now. They're not. So if they continue in that trend, this is something hopefully 4 to 6 games in where the quarterback is getting settled, playing well, offensive line finally gels and working well, then it's okay. If you never reach that point, then you do start looking at, well, maybe we do bring Anders Pete back to play at left guard. But I really don't know I really don't see moving Trevor Penning being an option. I really don't. I don't think moving Hurst to left tackle is an improvement. And at least with Penning, you know that there's a lot of upside. And then there's nobody else. There isn't anybody just like there's not depth along the Saints tackle spot. So you kind of have to let Penning try to get his growing reps in and hope it works. He's in the gauntlet. He's in the fire. There's nothing you can really do about it. If it was an interior spot, if we're talking about Cesar Ruiz and James Hurst struggling, well, there actually are options. You have Saldivari. You have Andres Pete. You've actually got people that you can rely on to some degree of what you know they're going to do on the field. You don't have that at left tackle. You know, if you move Hurst over there, you're literally just getting, I would call it worse, because you might get the same level of performance, but there's no upside. Like, there is no, he's going to become great, right? He is what he is, and that's fine. James Hurst is a multi-year veteran in the league, multi-team veteran, quality in terms of, we love that. Give him all his credit, but he's not an elite player, nor will he ever suddenly become an elite player. But you have that opportunity with Penning. So hope is more reps for Penning. He gets there at some point. But all that to say, you got to hope the offensive line gels, but at the same time, New Orleans doesn't really have a choice. You know, they're not sitting on this secret left tackle that nobody knew about. You know, if you slide in a Landon Young, I don't think you get better, right? If you look at who the Saints have on the roster, the only other tackle, and we're not including Hurst in this, is Landon Young. That's it. It's Ryan Ramczyk at right, Trevor Penning at left, and Landon Young. That's it. Everybody else is Andres Pete, Max Garcia, and Nick Saldivari. So you do have a good interior depth, but as far as being on that outside looking in, there's just simply not much you can really do. It's just not. So Brad says, just getting back from the Carolina game, the O-line needs work. Absolutely. That's what we're talking about. It needs to be out there. Penning and Ruiz were getting beat. Ruiz got beat on one play that everybody noticed, but for the most part, Ruiz is not really struggling. I would say that Ruiz is solid. He's not playing at a high level, but he's also not playing bad. And I would say that if I've noticed anything from the past 2 weeks, talking with Saints fans and also people outside of New Orleans, the one thing that I think most people kind of struggle with is that in-between type of a player. It's easy to see who's good, and it's easy to see who's bad, but it's really tough to gauge where somebody is in the middle. And that's kind of like where Cesar Ruiz is right now. Last year, especially towards the end of the year, Cesar Ruiz was playing as a top 5, if nothing else, top 10 right guard. I wouldn't say he's playing at a high level right now, but he's not doing bad. Eric McCoy's playing at a pretty good level. Ryan Ramczyk's not playing at an elite level either. But they're somewhere in the middle. And I'm hoping that the more that this unit gels together, the more cohesion they get with more reps and everything, the better they will become. But we shall have to wait and see. Have to wait and see. Gameboy says, hey, dudes, have you heard of Andy Herman, Pack a Day Podcast? If so, recommend it. Nope, nor do I listen to anybody else's podcast. Simply because I don't have time. People can be very good at what they do and very knowledgeable. I just don't have time to branch out and do that, just to keep it real. So, no, I haven't listened to him, but it sounds awesome that you found somebody that you enjoy and that provides an intelligent Packers take. I think that's great. Who dat to you, T5? Good to see you. Any other comments y'all have on the injuries before we talk about the Marcus May suspension? I do want to bring it up and, explain it because I think there's a little bit of confusion on how exactly that works. Say says, do you think the run game not moving will do, or do you think Taysom Hill will be the biggest factor against the Packers? I think the biggest factor, honestly, is how important are Kendre Miller and Tony Jones Jr. to improving the offensive line's run blocking performance. Because the run blocking was definitely better in week 2. I think a lot of that was getting back to some of the zone and then also just not playing an elite run defense that Tennessee came out with in that first week. But I think a lot of that's going to be on the players themselves. Are they able to get back to that comfortability of this is the style that this offensive line has been created for? I think that's a pretty big deal for it. And, Taysom is always going to be, that's why I call him an X factor. Taysom is amazing in spurts, predictable and not great when used extensively. There's a sweet spot for Taysom, right? If Taysom gets 10 to up to 15 touches a game, that's the sweet spot, with 15 being the absolute max. Typically, he's going to perform really, really well. As soon as he gets more and more carries, and that can be even receptions, but as soon as he gets more looks, especially if those looks aren't varied, the more teams will clamp down on that. The reason that Taysom Hill was so effective against Carolina is they clearly did not know how to handle him. Like, they did not prep for him at all. Taysom Hill had multiple 5-man box opportunities, and that's why he was able to rattle off 8, 9-yard runs. So it's actually credit to Pete Carmichael for recognizing that situation and taking advantage of what they were presenting, having good adjustments to go out and do that. Now, do I think he should have done that earlier? Sure. I don't think Pete Carmichael's perfect. It goes back to that whole middle ground argument. I think Pete Carmichael has improved this year, but he's certainly not the very top of the list. I'm not putting him there, but he certainly has improved in his situational awareness, some of his play calling, and it certainly doesn't have as bad of tendencies. Because one thing that he has definitely done better this year versus last year, and it's only been 2 games, so we can't draw too many conclusions, but he definitely is not providing very vanilla-based looks. He has presented the same style of pass. If you watched my Mike Thomas film study, you will have noticed I showed the same play twice, but it also came from varied looks and different fronts. He's done a very good job of making movement. One thing that I really keyed in on, if you remember week 1, they used Chris Olave with a Texas concept out of the backfield twice for big gains. They brought Rashid Shaheed in multiple times against Carolina, gave the same look, but never used it. So they changed the personnel and then used the same look to try to bait, like, hey, we know you watch this on film. You got to respect it. And this is something that I think Carmichael is doing better. Let me be very clear, because somebody's going to go, and I've run into too many of these conversations on Twitter. This is kind of what I'm bringing this up, because if you give Derek Carr some praise, people think you're saying he's a Hall of Famer, he's doing great. If you give Pete Carmichael some praise, people think you're saying he's the top coordinator in the league. And I'm not. I don't think the best way I could describe Derek Carr's play, just for example, since I'm kind of ranting on this conversation, the best way I could describe Derek Carr's play this year is through 2 games, he executes the offense better and is better at recognizing and throwing the ball than anybody that was playing quarterback last year for the Saints, but at the same time is underwhelming, as in he has not played to the degree that I have film studied him before in Vegas/Oakland. He's still doing it better than what we saw last year from whoever started. But at the same time, he ain't playing great. And that's kind of the difficulty, is getting people to recognize the middle ground. And the exact way to show that is look at the opposite side of the field. Look at the defense. That is great. The defense is fantastic, top to bottom, doing amazing at every level. Offense is doing middle of the ground at every level. And then you need to go find the bad out there, because there is bad. Because I'm going to give you some stats that kind of shock you, because I don't think most people realize this. Did you know that the New Orleans Saints are the 10th ranked offense in the NFL in yards created? That's how they rank them. I don't like that ranking. That's how they do it. You know, the Saints offense is 10th in the NFL. Now, all of us would agree that's not accurate, right? But it definitely shows you, holy crap, things are a little bit different than what we thought. Now, defensively, for those curious, the Saints currently rank 4th in the NFL, which is about where we would expect. But nobody looks at this offense and goes 10th, because it's a little bit misleading, and some of that's due to situations. But at the same time, last year, you're talking about this team being in the 20s in every statistical category offensively. They were struggling. Whereas now I'd say the Saints offense is right in the middle of the road area. Now they've got to get better, especially if you have playoff hopes. But anyway, all that to say, it's all about context and keeping everything in, kind of a straight line and going through that path and seeing everything that is there instead of just grabbing little things, right? Anyway, I'll answer a couple more of these questions. Just wanted to throw a recommendation someone to who, if you wanted a Packers take. I appreciate that. The only Packers guy that I know off the top of my head, and I've talked to him quite a bit, we DM on Twitter, I actually have been on his show a few times, is Grossi, Tom Grossi. The Grossi Posse Podcast. Yeah, if you ever heard of him. He's pretty cool, dude. Can you loan Green Bay back Jamal Williams? Tell you what, I'll make you a deal. You can't pass this up, Game Boy. Listen here. You go make this happen, we got a deal. If you can get Green Bay to give me David Bakhtiari for Jamal Williams, I'll do it. And that will be the only time that I'll sit here and be like, yeah, Saints fans, sure, I'll move Trevor Penning down to guard for now so that David Bakhtiari can be my left tackle. If you make that deal, we're good. Yeah, we'll do it. You can absolutely have him back. You can absolutely have him back. Oh, my goodness. This is back in the chat. So, Marcus May, real quick. Chat, don't worry. I am going to get back to you, but I want to make sure we put it out there. Marcus May has received his 3-game suspension. Now, I did notice on social media some Saints fans were surprised, where'd this come from? How comes this happening after the Saints go 2-0, etc.? I promise you this time, at least this time, this is not the league hates New Orleans. So, this is stemming from a DUI back in 2021, but the legal proceedings for this did not wrap up until the end of August, a few weeks ago, actually. So what typically happens, and you notice with the Alvin Kamara case, the NFL does not make a move, like they do not render their own judgment until criminal cases or civil cases have completed or run their course. And then the NFL will do their character policy. So because it was pushed so far back with, deferments and all these other things, they just kept pushing it back. 2 years later, Marcus May is being suspended for something that actually happened when he was with the Jets. So he's not misbehaving. He's not being a delinquent. Nobody used the T word. Don't be calling people thugs. He simply had something from years ago, DUI, that is biting him in the butt now, right? Now, y'all can debate on why a DUI has the same suspension level as Alvin Kamara getting in a fight with somebody in an elevator. But beyond that, that's why you have the 3-game suspension. That's why it's hitting now. I will also say that Marcus Mays looked pretty good so far this year under my eye. I haven't studied the coverages as much as I have the offensive and defensive line because I've been very excited about the offensive and defensive lines this year. But as far as what Marcus May is doing, he has given up a 79 QB rating so far this year, which is actually pretty good numbers. No touchdowns has he given up. And then obviously he has that pick that he got in week 1. But he will now be suffering the cost of this mental error, whatever you want to call it, from a few years ago. So that's why it took till now to have that suspension drop. How many wide receivers have we been playing, and why has A.T. Perry been inactive? So, great question. You've basically seen New Orleans Saints running 4. That's been the kind of gist of it. That's been Rashid Shaheed, Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, and then Keith Kirkwood, the veteran. Now, the main reason that you see a lot of Keith Kirkwood and not A.T. Perry, and I talked about this in the preseason, nobody really wants to hear this, but this is a fact. Get it through your thick skulls. I'm not yelling at anybody in particular. I just want to be dramatic. You got to be able to run block, and you better be able to do things really well at a fundamental level. And remember when I talked about in preseason, A.T. Perry sucked at blocking. A.T. Perry has a lot of upside. Like, he looks really good. But if you are going to play on this Saints team, you got to be able to do more than get one good catch or even 2 good catches for 20 and 30 yards. You've got to contribute in multiple ways. I don't think A.T. Perry is there yet to dominate offensively, so he's not going to take any of the catches away from Shaheed, Olave, and Thomas. Not to mention the tight end group that hasn't even got really going yet. And he doesn't have the ability to do the fundamental things like be that interior, say a short alignment, or maybe a +2 alignment that left or right side and block down with a crackback block or something. He's not there yet either. So while they are high on A.T. Perry, I expect him to be a healthy scratch until he continues to get better in that area. So I don't think it's any knock on him. I just think it's something that he's got to do. What happened to Traquan with run blocking then? Well, Traquan run blocks extremely well. That's actually one thing he does. But remember, Traquan's on IR. So that's Traquan does run block very well, though. That's one of the reasons he's kind of stuck around. Annoyingly so to many Saints fans. Is it harming tight end production when we have them help pinning? Yes and no. Anytime you're doing any type of rerouting, anytime you're doing any type of chip block, it's going to take about a second off of any of your routes. Yes. Yeah, it can be problematic. Yes, it can limit it. Basically, what it does is you're not going to run a seam route after you just did a chip, right? So if you have Juwan Johnson chip, you're not then going to go tell him to run a route that's 12 or 15 yards into the break, right? Just too much time to make that happen. But at the same time, that doesn't take them out of the game. You still run crossing patterns, still run Y leak, still run, out routes and even scissor concepts. There's still things that you can do, but it can limit you offensively. At the same time, that's better because remember, week 1, 40% of the time, Derek Carr was pressured. And whether you like or dislike Derek Carr, everybody hopefully can agree he is going to perform worse the more pressure he is under. So you have to find a way to negate that, and I think helping out Trevor Penning is the right call, no matter what. No matter what. So Creole, good to see you, man. Thank you for supporting the channel. This is great film study videos. Keep them coming. Can we get a secondary one? I am trying. My big issue is I've had Comcast issues for 3 days, so I haven't really had internet for 3 days. That makes it difficult to download the film and then make the study. But I am going to try to put out another one tomorrow. My goal is 3 film studies a week. That's my goal. My goal during the season is to give y'all 3 film studies a week. So far this week, I've given y'all 2. So if you're listening to this show and you haven't checked them out, I would encourage you to. I covered the sacks that happened on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball. And I covered Michael Thomas to kind of give everybody an idea of where he's at and maybe some realistic expectations of how he's performing. So if you haven't already, check those out. And if you have, then all I ask is you share them out with somebody else in Who Dat Nation, because I promise you, people have not seen them. And part of that is my fault. Last year, I went and looked. I didn't put out a single film study last year during the season. There was just too much going on in life. So people kind of fell off. They stopped expecting it. Well, it's back, and I want people to be able to enjoy it. So tell them to come swing it on through. Yeah. Thanks for the answer. Makes sense. You're welcome, T5. And is this the best wide receiver group we ever had? Well, Taylor, I'm going to be real with you. 2 games in, I'm not going to say anybody's the best anything, because you can make a legitimate case right now. This is the best cornerback duo we've ever seen. Ever. Well, at least in a Saints uniform. But it's 2 games of Paulson, Debo, Marshawn Lattimore, who were also really good 2 years ago together. So 2 games is not enough for me to get crazy and start, crowning everybody. But Paulson Debo's come out, had really good. I mean, even that one call he got that got the sack killed wasn't even that egregious of a penalty. I think sometimes people just get a reputation. But Marshawn Lattimore has literally allowed 1 catch through 2 games. He's giving up a quarterback rating of like a 2, like a 2.5, has an interception, obviously hasn't given up a touchdown. And he's got, multiple PBUs. I don't know how many PBUs he has. So 2 games just isn't enough. And I'm always hesitant to jump a lot into that. And this goes back to what I was trained. When I went through scouting and player evaluation, when I was training as a scout, one of the things they teach you, and every team I've talked to has the same idea. You need at least 4 games. You're looking for about 200 snaps, so that you can notice as many of the tendencies as possible, what they tend to do in certain situations. And you can't see enough of anybody in 2 games to truly have a well-rounded idea. Now, you can get some ideas of what's working, what's not. I'm not saying that 2 games is pointless. You obviously use what you have. But if you really want to build a true scouting report, a well-developed report on an individual player, whether that's a quarterback, a corner, whatever, you need at least 4 games, preferably up to 6. And that way you're looking at away games, home games, outdoor games, indoor games, weather games, if applicable, high competition, low competition, all these different variables that come into how a guy can perform. So, yeah, I mean, as far as this is the best wide receiver group, I think this wide receiver group is playing really well. Are they the best? No, because I'll be honest with you. Everybody's talking about, well, why is Derek Carr not throwing touchdown passes in the red zone? Well, I'll be real. A lot of times the wide receivers ain't freaking open in the red zone right now. So it's not like they're playing perfect. Now, between the 20s, they're doing great. I think there's still ways that they can get better. I think it's fantastic that Chris Olave has right at 200 yards. I think that's fantastic. I think it's amazing that Rashid Shaheed's already at 150 through 2 games. And Michael Thomas is averaging 55, 60 yards a game right now, which puts him on pace to get dangerously close to that 1,000. All those things are great, right? But 2 games, it's not enough. It's not enough. Is poor offensive execution causing people to think Pete isn't doing a good job? Absolutely. 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 Stafford led NFL in picks and won the Super Bowl. Tom was getting sacked, and offense wasn't getting it done. Tom being Tom Brady? And switched things up midseason and started peaking at the right time. Oh, okay, yeah. So you were talking about Tom Brady in Tampa. And I agree. No cap. You got to give it time. And I think it's all about expectations, because for whatever reason, there feels like there's this expectation that Carr is supposed to be a Hall of Famer. And I don't think he is. No offense, Derek Carr. I don't think you're a Hall of Famer. Maybe one day you are, but I think Derek Carr is just really good. And so, we got into this discussion, and hell, I actually got commented on by somebody. On Twitter, right before the show, is like, we're paying this man $150 million. I mean, where Derek Carr is not even in the top 10 in earnings per year for quarterbacks. So it's also about realistic expectations. So when you think of it that way, is Derek Carr playing to where his income has dictated he is? And I don't think you can argue that Derek Carr's not a top 15 player at the position, by the way, not overall. I'm not saying he's top 15 in the NFL. Just saying at a quarterback, is he really playing worse than top 15? I don't think he is. And it's through 2 games. So we'll see what it looks like in week 6, week 8, week 12, etc. And we'll go from there. So thank you, Red. I appreciate you. What Packers weapons do we need to worry about? Jordan Love. Yeah, I actually like Love. I was hoping that Green Bay would move on from Aaron Rodgers years ago. And I remember being on Grossie's podcast and Packers fans just reaming the hell out of me for having that opinion. I thought Love should have been the starter a couple years ago. I thought they should have moved on from Aaron then. So he's somebody that I actually think could be a really good player in the league. It's still really early because obviously he hasn't had a lot of starting experience. And I think as a position, you're going to need a lot of Love actually getting time to be that guy. Now, it was 2021, this is rookie year. So I think 2022 is where I was like, hey, it'd be great if they pushed Aaron Rodgers out last year. I think it was 2021. I said this on Grossie's podcast. Whatever the last time we played the Packers. I talked about, look, you need to move on from Aaron Rodgers, give the rookie a year to grow, and then move on up to him. But hey, even though Jordan Love is not throwing, like he doesn't lead the league in completion percentage, he doesn't lead the league in yards. You know what he does lead the league in? Quarterbacks that, in terms of quarterback rating, touchdown throws. And he has yet to throw an interception. Now, it's 2 games, and that doesn't guarantee that that's going to continue, right? But it does show you that he can certainly help score. 2 teams they've gone against, Chicago Bears and Atlanta Falcons. So defensively, they're not going against any type of juggernauts. So that could look very differently going against the New Orleans Saints, clearly. But just to be fair, like just to be as pragmatic in a view and as objective in a view as you can be, this is a guy who will make some great throws. I do like his arm, and he will attack you. And if you let him, you will give up a lot of points to Jordan Love through the air. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't or shouldn't fear him on the ground, but he's not really he's not like a Lamar Jackson type mobile. If I had to give any type of like how his mobility is, if y'all haven't watched a lot of Jordan Love, think more like a Burrow mobile or even a Russell Wilson. He'll run if he has to. I think he's got like 6 carries this year, but he's not really going to move. He's going to try to decimate you from the pocket and move to buy time in that pocket. I think he can do some really good things from what I've seen from him doing that. As far as who their leading receiver is, there's not really anybody right now that's popping off in terms of Green Bay. They do not have a single 100-yard receiver through 2 games. Their leading receiver in terms of yards is actually their running back, Aaron Jones. And the receiver up next is Jaden Reed. Now, we talked about them having some receivers on the injury report and everything, and that could certainly have an impact on it. You know, it was talking about Christian Watson was on the injury report for them. How this plays out, we'll see. But in terms of weapons, the quarterback, I think, is the big one because the quarterback, it says a lot that the guy has 6 TD passes, yet doesn't have a single receiver over 100 yards. The guys who've caught the passes, Jaden Reed, Romeo Dobbs, Aaron Jones, and Dontavius Wicks. So he will go after and will try to target those wide receivers and make those big plays. He's a young guy, meaning that man is going to be able to or willing to take some risk. He's going to be aggressive. And people like that. So, but just like TJ says in the chat, he can definitely extend a play if he needs to and make something happen. And it's one of the reasons you like him because he fits really well in that offense that they're putting together in Green Bay. He fits really well with LaFleur's style where you seem to have Rodgers who really wanted to stick with what he is and what he knows. I'm not trash talking Aaron. I'm just speaking stylistically. I think Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love are a great combo. I'm curious to see how they look moving forward. So if you're the New Orleans Saints, you absolutely better come in with your A game with those corners that we were just hyping up. And those are the matchups to watch because Jordan Love does prefer his wide receivers over everything else. And he has a pretty good ability to read the field compared to what you've seen so far this year. I would argue that in terms of pre-snap to post-snap diagnosis, Jordan Love is better than the rookie you just played in Carolina, which is to be expected because Love has been in the league 3 years now. Even if it's not a starter, he's had time. He's better than Ryan Tannehill at processing the field and making those throws. Now, I'm not saying that Jordan Love is a better overall quarterback yet, and I know any Packers fans who might come upon this podcast can get mad at me. I do think there's something to be said about Tannehill as a veteran in certain situations that Jordan Love just hasn't really faced yet. And I'm talking about pressure situations. Yeah, Jordan Love has played in games before this year, but I think that there are some things that you can maybe take advantage of. Game-winning drive situations, fourth quarter comeback situations, I think lean to that being a negative for him because those are situations he's unfamiliar with. Those are things that you can pressure him into making mistakes. So for the Saints, really want the offense to come out, score a touchdown in that first drive, start building a lead, and you want to put pressure on Jordan Love, right? Put pressure on him. You want to force him into a mistake. And if you're in New Orleans, you have to capitalize on those mistakes. I loved what they did in week 1. They did a fantastic job of this. But in week 2, there are 2 dropped interceptions, one by Lante Taylor, one by Marshawn Lattimore. They've got to complete those opportunities. If you're going to help this offense, because I don't think the New Orleans Saints offense is a top 5, top 10 offense right now. Maybe they get there at some point. But if you are going to help out this offense, you've got to give them more opportunities. Turnovers do that. We shall see how it plays out. But that's kind of where I'm at. That's the biggest matchup for me when it comes to looking at their offense. It really comes down to the quarterback. I think they have a stout offensive line, comparatively speaking, to what New Orleans has been presenting. That's something that you have to worry about. On the defensive side of the ball is where it gets a little bit more interesting, actually. Now, this is not a team in Green Bay that's a heavy team when it comes to pressuring and sacking the quarterback. And as far as blitzing goes, you can't expect it from the linebacker position. It's very similar to how Dennis Allen will do it. They are, I think, like 30-something blitzes. So it's a active blitz group, but it's not a super successful blitz group. It's good, but it's not bad. And I say that because we're watching the New Orleans offensive line trying to improve for that. They struggled the most versus twists and stunts. They've not struggled the most against blitzes, surprisingly. So I'm very curious to see how Green Bay approaches in that regard. And then in the coverage side of things, this is actually where I get really kind of like excited almost. So this is Rasul Douglas, and I love this guy. I don't know if he's, because I looked at his stat line before the pod, and I was kind of shocked by it. But Jari Alexander is a guy that I've actually thought was one of the better corners in the league for a while. But his stats right now are abysmal. He's giving up a quarterback rating of 135 when targeted, which is a little bit shocking to me because that's not what I expect from him. But I still want to say what I said earlier. 2 games is not enough to do anything with anybody, so don't sleep. Between Rasul Douglas, between Jari Alexander, and even on the inside there with Carrington Valentine, I think that you are going to have a pretty good matchup if you are the New Orleans Saints wide receivers against their DB room. It also goes back to why we need that running game to be really good to help open that up, because Rasul Douglas is giving up a 38 QB rating right now. Basically, if you throw at Rasul right now, you're going to lose. So we'll see. We'll see. You know, like I said, the Jari thing I think is really misleading because when I've watched Alexander on film, and I'll go ahead and tell you, I've not watched Jari Alexander through 2 games in this season, but having watched him previously, he's a very good corner, very good technically sound corner. I love him as either a boundary or a field side guy. I am curious to see if something has changed that's made him struggle more this year. But again, 2 games is such a small sample. Sometimes guys can just have bad 2 games, and that happens. Game Boy says the great thing with Love is he has developed the ability to read with Tom Clements, and he will attack the middle. The dangerous thing with that Game Boy in this game is New Orleans wants you to attack the middle. They actually leave their corners generally on an island on the outside, whether they're playing cover 3, they'll use quarters match, etc. But they want to draw you in. They'll play Tampa 2 and cover the hole with a linebacker. They'll play cover 3 robber and sneak a safety down in there. They want people to attack the middle. They are baiting them to do it, but that doesn't mean they can't be beat over the middle. It just means they want that to happen. So that actually makes it a great matchup, right? It makes it a who's better, the quarterback with the tight window or the defense that's trying to lure you in to throw that pass over the middle 15, 20 yards and try to pick it off. You know, who's going to end up winning that battle? And if there's a way historically to take advantage of what the Dennis Allen defense does, short underneath crossing patterns, mesh concepts, etc., rub routes have historically been a problem. More of middle of the field short, not middle of the field intermediate or deep. I'm very curious to see what Green Bay tries to come through, what Matt LaFleur tries to come through to kind of like provide an answer for that and that style of defense. How does he adjust? Remember, offensively, we're talking about a guy in LaFleur that his offense this year is second in the NFL in points. Last year was 14th. The year before that was 10th. The year before that was first, right? So this is a team that scores a lot of points. I don't think LaFleur is the best OC/HC in the NFL. I don't even have him in my top 3, but I still think he's good. I still think he deserves a good bit of respect as well. What's up, Adam? How are you doing? Good to see you. Welcome on in. Red says, Penny did better this past week. Still not great, but definitely improved. I agree with that statement. I agree with that a lot. Game Boy says, seeing a lot of pressure would be good because Love was caught off guard by Spagnolia when KC did it. The thing with New Orleans is they do a lot of varied pressures too. So New Orleans is, we weren't able to say this for a long time, but we can say it now. New Orleans is an elite defense. I mean, New Orleans is, let me go look at Green Bay's schedule real quick. And I'm curious. The Green Bay schedule, I'm going to compare the Saints defense versus everybody that y'all face this year. The Saints defense is the best defense y'all will face until, damn, there's a legitimate argument for this is the best defense the Packers will play the entire season. So here's who the Packers have played and will play. The Packers played the Bears and the Falcons. They'll play the Saints, Lions, Raiders, Broncos, Vikings, Rams, Steelers, Chargers, the Lions again, Kansas City Chiefs, New York Giants, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Carolina Panthers, Minnesota Vikings, and then, of course, the Chicago Bears again. This truly might be the best defense that Green Bay sees all season long. So I'm very curious to see how that matchup plays out and if Green Bay is able to take down, which should be, because if I was on the Green Bay side of this, if I was making Green Bay's podcast, if you dominate the Saints defense, you should be confident for the rest of the freaking year. Like, you should be able to go in and say, hey, we did that against the Saints defense. We should be able to beat every other defense we see. Now, for the Saints, the opposite side's true. Your reputation's on the line because you really are a top defense and have been for a long time now. You know, Dennis Allen, we can debate his head coaching. We can debate the offensive side of the ball, but the Saints defense for literally 6 years now has been a top unit, and they have been a top 5 unit for essentially the past 4 years straight. That hasn't changed this year. So very curious to see how that matchup goes. But if you are a Packers fan and Packers managed to win this game by beating the Saints defense, man, they should be confident as heck to go out through the rest of the year. No cap. Read that one early, man, and appreciate it. You mentioned that earlier. I don't know if you copy-pasted that on purpose or not. But Red says, DA is a defensive genius, no doubt about that. It's crazy because I wouldn't always have said Allen was a defensive genius. And I'm really curious what all changed. Like, how did the improvement happen? How do I know that and why do I say that? Okay, well, his first year as a defensive coordinator with Denver, his defense was 24th in points allowed, 20th in yards allowed. I'm like, okay, well, fine. You know, that was his first time. But then with Oakland, when he was the head coach for 3 years, the best his defense ever was in yards was 18th, and in points allowed, 28th. Even in 3 years, you should argue that you had better talent somehow that you pulled in. And then when he finally came back to New Orleans to be the DC, I'm not including the 2015 because that was the year that Rob Ryan was still in charge. But since then, in 2016, they were 31st. And then right after that, they went 10th, 14th, 13th, 5, 4, 9, 5. I don't know what clicked. I really want to know what clicked. Because yes, having talent helps, but hell, the man had Khalil Mack, right? Talent's great. And obviously having elite talent is going to help you. But also beyond just the talent, something clicked for him and he started doing significantly better. And I'm curious if I could ever just sit down with him. That's the type of thing I would ask him. What clicked that made him the best, one of the best defensive coaches this past decade? Because it's wild. Think about it, y'all. Since 2016, let's start with 2017. So 2017 to now, which is what, 7 years. The worst the defense has ever ranked is 14th and has been a top 10 unit for 5 of those. That's crazy. That's crazy. So I think we match up well with Green Bay on both sides of the ball. Limit the turnovers and we should win. I agree, K-Man. I do think that the New Orleans Saints are the better team here, mostly because they have an elite defense. The offense is still finding itself. But in the reverse of that, I don't think Green Bay has an elite defense, even though I do give a lot of respect and praise to some of their DBs. I specifically fear Rasul Douglas and Jari Alexander, but I do not fear the Green Bay front seven like I did Carolina or Tennessee. That isn't to say that I don't think they can be effective. I simply don't think that they're the level of Tennessee and Carolina. And I don't fear the safety set for Green Bay. But the corners do worry me. But other than that, I mean, defensively, I think this is an offense that New Orleans needs to continue improving, but they should be able to do that in this game. Really just comes down to how that defense is able to hopefully slow down Green Bay. And then Green Bay is a team that has scored 62 points this season. What does that translate to? Well, Saints fans, to give you an idea what that translates to, that's over 30 points a game. That's double what the Saints are doing. So, yeah. Put that feather in your hat. Something's got to get better. Something's got to get better. The best defensive player on that D-line, in my opinion, is going to be Kenny Clark, by the way. Going to operate from the interior. So if you're wondering who to watch, I give you all these players every week. If you're wondering who to watch, Kenny Clark going against Cesar Ruiz, James Hurst, specifically James Hurst. Putting him as a 3-tech or even a 1 with Hurst scares me. And technically Eric McCoy. It's really going to come down to how many twists and stunts are they going to do? How many twists and stunts are they going to do? Because I think that's where you've seen the New Orleans Saints struggle the most through 2 weeks. So, yeah. We shall see. How fast are their corners? Fast. Yeah, I mean, Jari can fly. Jari can fly. I mean, Rasul Douglas is no slouch either. You're not going to just beat either one of these guys with pure speed more than once or twice in the game. You might beat them with a double move and stuff, but like if you're just trying to run a 40-yard dash, you're not going to get too much on them. You're going to have to beat them with technique. You're going to have to beat them with good play calling. You're going to have to beat them with your offensive line holding up to that pass rush. So we know he's going to get injured at some point. He might be better than Hurst. You're talking about Andres Pete. I think Andres Pete should stay the backup. He should stay the backup. So let's get some score predictions in because we are right under an hour, which is crazy to me. I think that because of this being an away game, I'm not going to be as big on envisioning the Saints scoring a lot. But I will say that I think that defensively, this is the weakest defense they faced, even though I don't think this is a bottom-of-the-league defense. What I think this is, personal opinion, I think this is an average defense around the NFL. I feel like this defense for Green Bay is very much how the Saints offense is. They are right in that middle area where they could be better, but maybe they're not better yet, right? I think this is the easiest defensive test for the offense so far this year. So if they continue to improve, this is going to be the matchup where they actually score some points. So here's what I think is going to happen. I feel like this is going to be a 28-17 win for New Orleans. Yeah, 2 scores. I know I'm being a little bit bold here, but I'm just being honest. I feel like if Green Bay's defense was a little bit more stout, especially in the front 7, because that's where the Saints have struggled when they have struggled these first 2 weeks, I would lean that way. But right now, I would say the Saints are just a better overall team because they have an elite defense. When you got a top 5 anything, and I don't think Green Bay has a top 5 anything, you're going to probably be the favorites. It is a road game, and I don't think Green Bay is somewhere you just easily go up and play. And I'll also be clear. I said this right almost an hour ago. If this game was in December, I would pick Green Bay like 90 times out of 90. Like if it was the frozen tundra, give it to them. But it's September. It should be good weather days up there. Good football, pretty day for football on this upcoming Sunday. So with that in mind, I'm going to say it be about 28-17, leaning in New Orleans' favor. But I'm very curious to see how it goes. And keep in mind that you had 2-score lead against Green Bay, against Carolina before New Orleans' defense decided to go into full-on prevent. They took Cameron Jordan out of the game. They took Carl Granderson out of the game and just played pure prevent and ended up giving up a touchdown. So, yeah. How's our O-line fare against their D-line overall? I think their D-line has some players, but specifically, this offensive line is going against their weakest test through 3 weeks. And that's really only saying something because the Titans and the Panthers both have very scary front sevens. And again, I'm not trying to say that what you have in Green Bay is trash, all right? Devonta Wyatt and Kenny Clark are not trash. They are not. But they are not the same level of scare that, say, Brown and Burns were in Carolina. That inside-out threat is just really something special. And the reason it can be dangerous, I guess, to the Saints is the two guys that I'm mentioning that are the scariest for Green Bay are the interior guys. But that's also the easiest ones to protect against. Slide protections and having your back pull up in the A-gap if you're doing a 3-2 split, 5-0, all these things that the Saints can do. What you really worry about is the twist stunt game on the outside, fooling Hurst and Penning. So it's really up to Green Bay. How well can they perform that? So I appreciate it, Game Boy. You see Sunday Night Football said the Saints aren't even a top 10 team in the NFC right now. I did, Red, but I don't want to pay attention to any of that. In fact, let us be the underdog. I'm here for it. Let's see. Nikki says 24-17. Saints is how they have it. Game Boy says 27-21. Green Bay. But if New Orleans wins, they have it 30-17. And it's definitely going to be curious if the Saints defense can hold back Jordan Love. So, yeah. I'm your favorite Saints commentator. Well, thank you. Or commentator. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's very nice of you to say. We're going to wrap up here. Join the Discord if you haven't already. If you're not a Saints fan, don't worry. You are welcome in the Who Dat Nation Discord. We're here to talk ball, talk film, and hopefully enjoy great football season. We're right at an hour, so we're going to wrap up the podcast for the day. Thanks that Comcast allowed us to get through an entire episode. It's actually fantastic, and I appreciate every single one of y'all. If you want to support the channel, not required, but appreciate it. I can only do what I do with people like y'all, PayPal, Venmo, Cash App. Only reason I can do film studies, only reason I can do the podcast is because people like y'all tip. So if you got $5 or even $1, it helps out tremendously. Appreciate all of y'all. Who dat? God bless. We'll catch you Sunday after the game. Deuces, that's me. We outie. That's it.